online special seminar. It is very nice. And so, as Marie told you, I'm going to present you a joint work with Nicolas Janin, my co-author. So I'm going to talk about fiscal federalism. So, okay. So, as you may know, the question of fiscal federalism, or the question of what is the optimal level the optimal geographical level to provide public good, is a long-standing interest for economists. And maybe it all started with Thiebaud, that theorize how people would vote with their feet to maximize their test for their heterogeneous test for local public good and local taxes. And then there has been the work by the seminal work by Oates. And since these two seminal works, there has been a very long and rich theoretical literature that has tried to list the pros and the cons of decentralizing versus centralizing local public good provision. So, and basically, all these scholars, they have pinned down the key trade-off for determining the optimal level of centralization. And so it's a trade-off between misallocation and externalities. So on the one hand, if you centralize local public spending, there might be some information gap because the central planner will not know all the heterogeneous need of local population. So we won't be able to adapt to the heterogeneity of tastes. And besides, some political coalition may arise between some local jurisdiction that will try to deprive other local jurisdiction of some local public spending. So, so this will be inefficient. On the other hand, if you decentralize local public spending, some local jurisdiction might underprovide local public good if there is some spillover effect. So what is a spillover effect? It's the fact that local inhabitants, they might not only enjoy the local public good that they pay for, but they might also enjoy local public good of neighboring jurisdiction for which they don't pay. And as when they vote for the level of local public good that they pay for, they are not internalizing the fact that other population are going to enjoy this public good, they will underprovide local public good. So really, the theoretical literature has emphasized how important is the magnitude of the spillover parameter when one wants to determine the optimal level of centralization versus decentralization of local public spending. But up to now, there is still scarce empirical attempt to assess the key channel of fiscal federalism, especially the channel of, as I told you about, the spillover channel. And to our knowledge, there is still no empirical attempt that are embedded in a full economic geography framework. So in this paper, we develop, so what do we do? So in this paper, we are not going to answer to the big question of what is the optimal level of decentralization, but we are going to give more insight on one of the channel, which is, we believe, very important, the spillover channel. So in this paper, we develop a flexible framework to quantify public good spillover. So first, we build a quantitative spatial equilibrium model of jurisdiction that are characterized by a lot of things, but most importantly by endogenous fiscal amenities. And then we also model spillover. And so we assume that spillover follow a binary structure. That is, there might be spillover between block of jurisdiction, but there is no spillover between block of jurisdiction. So at some point, spillover die out abruptly. Okay? So then we take our model to the data, and we use data on France and in fact, on all French municipalities. So for those who don't know French very well, you must know that municipalities are the lower tier of French local jurisdiction. and that there is a lot of them because, in fact, French municipality almost accounts for half of the total number of municipalities in the European Union. And these municipalities are in charge of very important things. For example, they are in charge of primary schools, cultural projects, urban planning, and so on and so forth. And these municipalities are nested in municipal federation. So we use this data on French municipality, and we use from evidence of how households respond to local public good changes. And so we are going to look at how population shares, housing consumption, and housing prices change when local public good changes exogenously. And then we use what we have shown in the reduced form effect to structurally estimate our model parameter with a GMM, which allow us to simulate the welfare effect of a centralization reform in France. But again, remember that we are going only to estimate one of the cons of decentralization, but we are not going to estimate all the pros of decentralization. So our main result, briefly, is the fact that people can exploit household responses at different geographic scales to reveal local public good spillover magnitude. For example, in our case, we are going to look at how people respond within block of jurisdiction versus between blocks of jurisdiction. And then in the empirics, we show that indeed, in France, people care about local public good. So we do see reaction in terms of population share and housing prices when local public good changes. And we see more responses between municipal federation, rather than within, which is for us an argument to defend our hypothesis that there is spillover within block and not between block. Why? Because if there is spillover within a block, you don't need to move when one of your neighboring jurisdiction increase its local public good, because you already partially enjoy it because of the spillover effect. Whereas when you are outside of the block, you don't enjoy the increase in the local public good because there is no spillover between municipal federation. And so lastly, as for the structural parameter, we find that people care a lot about local public goods that are in the same municipal federations and their municipality, and that public goods are quickly congested, but not one for one. So the reality literature, so I'm going to go briefly on that. So as I said before, our paper is related, of course, to the literature on fiscal federalism, and mostly the theoretical one, and also to the work that try to empirically estimate the theoretical literature. But and also very importantly, our work is related to the urban economic literature, in which we borrow the canonical model of Rosen and Roback, in which we add endogenous amenity as it is done in the last decade in this literature. Okay, so I'm going first to give you a sketch of our model, then to present the data. Then I will go to the reduced form result, which will allow me to explain to you the structural estimations, and I will very briefly present the welfare result of our counterfactual exercise, and then I will conclude. Okay. So the model. So most important, I'm not going to give you all the detail of the model because it will be too long. What is important is just to remind everyone what is the spatial equilibrium framework à la Rosen and Roback, and then give you I will explain to you what we add to this framework. So the spatial equilibrium framework à la Rosen and Roback. So there is a discrete number of jurisdictions that are indexed by J, and they are nested in areas. So it's block of jurisdiction. And the jurisdictions are characterized by a lot of things: local housing, labor market, but Importantly, they are characterized by their endogenous amenity. That is, people vote on local taxes and local spending. So these two variables, they are endogenous and they are the result of a vote by the inhabitants. And then there is a continuum of individual of measure one that choose in which jurisdiction they want to live in. So here it's pretty standard compared to the urban economic literature. So households, they decide to live in the jurisdictions that maximize their utility, and their utility and the log of their utility is additively decomposable between a base utility VJ that only depend of the jurisdiction and an idiosyncratic test that is household specific. So, and then we are going to assume that the idiosyncratic test of household are independently and identically distributed across and among households, and that they follow a Gumbel law. So up to here, it's still very standard. And under these two assumptions, so the additive decomposability and the Gumbel law, the demand for jurisdiction can be expressed very simply. So then the base utility can be again decomposed additively between something that depend of the consumption of the numéraire, a consumption of the local public good, and a consumption of the exogenous residential amenities that do not depend of the consumption of the numéraire of the local public good, but can be anything else, such as the distance to the lake or the quality of the school or anything that is important for household, but that is independent from from housing market and labor market. So, and here now we do something a bit different because, as I told you before, we want to estimate the magnitude of local public good spillover. So what do we? So we assume that household, they value a bundle of local public goods. So it's bold G. That basically is a Cobb-Douglas function of the local public good of jurisdiction in which they live in, and the local public good of the jurisdictions that are in the same block of jurisdiction. So this is where we assume that there might be spillover within block, but not none between block of jurisdiction. But the thing is that the local public good, they are congested by household when they value or they use it. And so before we have introduced the spillover intensity parameter, with the congestion equation, we introduce the kappa parameter, which is a congestion intensity parameter. So by doing so, by allowing local public good to be congested, as soon as local public goods are not congested one for one, it means that we are introducing in the model agglomeration economies, because it's going to be cheaper for a bigger jurisdiction to pay for local public good. And in the end, it's the household who live in a jurisdiction that choose, that vote for the level of local public good before consumption and before the bundle, and the local taxes that maximize their base utility under the jurisdiction budget constraint. So briefly, the jurisdiction optimize the following problem. So they try to maximize the base utility subject to the jurisdiction budget constraint, in which there is the public good, and what they get from housing tax and capital tax, and a jurisdiction can also benefit from subsidies from upper layer of government. So I'm not going to say more about the model. We add to that other stuff, especially housing supply equation, labor demand equation, and market clear equation. And under all this equation, the equilibrium exists, but multiple equilibria can arise because of agglomeration forces. But what is important for you is just to have in mind how we model local public good. And then we are going to use this model. I just want to check the time. Okay. So then we are going to use the equation of the model to build moment condition, because remember what we want to do in the end is to estimate our structural parameter. So for that we are going to perform a GMM, and so we need a moment equation. So what are we going to do? So we take some of the equation of the model, we plug into one another in order to express the logarithm of the residential amenities epsilon as a linear function of the logarithm of the endogenous variable of the model. So that's what I show you here. So as I told you, this is what is about the residential amenities equation. Okay, so we have that, but it's not enough, because here you can see that the logarithm of the residential amenities of the jurisdiction depend not only on variable of its own jurisdiction, but also on variable with prime, which means that they depend also on variable of other jurisdiction. And here we are going to do kind of a trick to remove all the prime. So what do? We are going up to now to transform each equation by looking first to variation within a block and by variation between blocks. So let me be more clear. So we are going to look at the variation of a variable relative to the mean variation of its own block of jurisdiction. And then we are going to calculate the mean variation of each block, and we are going to look at the variation of one block compared to the national variation. And so this allows us to transform the residential amenities equation. And like this one. So this equation is the within block equation. That means that we have we apply an operator in which we divide by the geometric mean in a block, and we also apply a time difference operator. So it's the first. For up to now, we are looking at a static model, and here we are comparing two different time, so two different equilibrium, and so we are doing a comparative static. So basically we can consider here that we are looking at double difference, because we are differencing by the time, and we are differencing also by the mean of the jurisdiction, and now you can see that all variable with prime have disappeared. And we do the same between blocks, and here again all the variable with prime have disappeared. So what is important here is that if you compare the equation of the residential amenity within a block and between a block, you can see that the delta parameter, which is a parameter that we really want to estimate, the spillover parameter, only appear in the equation within, which is logical because we have assumed that there is no spillover between blocks. Okay, so for the moment, I stop here with the moment equation, and I'm going to the data, and you will see later on how we use these two equations in the GMM. Okay, so the data. So very briefly, so we are using, as I told you, data on French municipalities, and so we have data on all the endogenous variables of our models. That is, we have data on local taxes, we have data on municipal financial accounts, we have data on income tax data, we have data on housing stock and population, on housing price, and we also use some socio-demographic characteristic of the municipality, which are here the jurisdiction. So for the time span, we have data approximately from 2002 to 2014, and for some data we only have data the even year. for example, for the housing price and the housing stock and population, we only have data each even year. So let me go to the reduced form result. So here we are doing related to the theoretical part of the paper, but also not, but which stand in itself in a way. So we are going to see how the endogenous variable of our model react when there is an exogenous changes in a local public good. So in the empirics, so now we assume that all the geographical area, all the blocks are municipal federation, and we are going to look at within and between municipal federation variation. And we are going to instrument changes in public good by changes in investment subsidies. So it makes sense to use this instrument because remember the budget constraint of the jurisdiction here. Part of the budget can come from upper layer of subsidy from upper layer of government. Okay, so if here F increases, it's logical that the variable will change, and especially that the level of local public good will increase. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. But you can ask whether this instrument is exogenous or not. So what we are going to do, we are going to try to argue that there is no systematic difference in municipality dynamics before investment subsidy shocks between high and low subsidy receiver. That is, we are going to regress the double difference of each of our endogenous variable in the model by double difference of investment subsidy that we can also call investment subsidy shock, and we are going to double difference before the shock and after the shock, and we expect that that investment subsidy shock don't have impact before the shock but have an impact after the shock. That is, that the beta d are equal to 0 when d is inferior to 0. Okay. So for the data, we use shocks that are happening in 2007, 2009, and 2010. And so we are going to see that how changes in investment subsidy in 2007, 2009, 2010 has an impact before the year of the shock and after the year of the shock. And so I'm going to present you the cumulative elasticity that we have estimated on all the endogenous variable of our model. And we start, of course, by the public good index, because if investment subsidy shock are a good instrument, it must have an impact on the public good index. So when you have more investment subsidy, we expect that there will be more public good index. So first, we are going to look within municipal federation. So when you increase the investment subsidy by 1%, we see that before the shock, there is maybe a slight decreasing pre-trend, but after the shock, which is almost non-significant, but after the shock, so after the increase of investment subsidy, you can see that the public good index increased almost by 0.3% after 4 years. And if you look at the population of the municipality, you can see that the population increased by around 0.02%. So it's significant, but it's an increase. It's a small increase. Okay. So now, if we look at other variables such as the housing consumption per head, the wage within the of the municipality. So when there is a change within a municipal federation, or if you look at the total housing consumption or the housing prices, you can see that the only variable that increase is total housing consumption, which makes sense because there is no impact on housing prices and there is an impact on population. There is no impact on consumption per head, so the impact only comes from an increase in the population in the jurisdictions that has experienced an increase in the local public good. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to look at what happened when the local public good, the investment subsidy that receive a municipal federation increase compared to all the other municipal federation. So we find the same magnitude of elasticity of the public good index, but what is interesting is that the increase in the population is much higher. It's almost 5 times higher than the increase in the population within municipal federation. And that is very important because, as I told you before, if we see more reaction between municipal federation, it helps us to argue that there is spillover within municipal federation and that there is none between, or at least that there is more spillover within than between. And so here, between municipal federation, you can see that the housing consumption decreased. So when the wage increased a little bit, and it's logical that the housing consumption per head decrease because the housing price also increase. So you can see that there is more responses between municipal federation rather than within. Okay. So now that I've shown you some reduced form result, I'm going to go to the structural estimation. So I'm going to remind you how works a generalized method of moment. So in theory, you are going to rely on moment condition of the form an instrument is uncorrelated with some residual. Okay. So in our case, we are going to use as a residual, we are going to use the double difference of residential amenities. And we are going, so once you have that, if you are going to replace what you can by empirical counterpart. So in our case, we are going to replace the residential amenity by its analytical expression. And if you remember well, we can express the residential amenities as a linear function of endogenous variable of our model and also of parameters of our model. And as econometrician, we observe the endogenous variables. So we are going to be able to replace them by their observed values in the data. And so then we are going to be able to replace the theoretical moments by their empirical counterparts. And then what does the GMM? The GMM search for the set of parameters that minimize the empirical moment, basically. So the GMM produce an objective function which has to be minimized, and this objective function is a function of the empirical moments. Okay, but in practice, we need an instrument. So of course, what we did with our reduced form result, we did that to pave the way for our generalized method of moment. And so of course, we are going to use investment subsidy shock as our instrument, but we still need to argue a little bit more that the investment subsidy variation is a valid instrument. So here, what is the identifying assumption? It's the fact that long-term double difference of residential amenities, epsilon, and long-term double different investment subsidies are uncorrelated. So in our model, we have assumed that the residential amenities are totally uncorrelated from any of the endogenous variable of our model. And we assume, of course, that there is no missing variable or whatever. So if we truly believe in the model, the equation 1 holds, because of course there is in our model we assume that there were no link between the residential amenities and our instrument. Okay, but then as a econometrician we can wonder if this assumption holds in reality. So first, if we still believe in the form of the model, that is, we believe that we can express residential amenities as a linear function of the endogenous variable of our model, but we allow for residential amenities to depend or to be linked somehow to some of the endogenous variables of the model. Then, with the diff and diff evidence that we have provided in the last section, we can argue that the equation 1 still holds, because we can argue that before the shock equation 1 holds, and that it's a good reason to believe that even after the shock, this will hold, because it means that the residential amenities has no link to the investment subsidy is not based on the value of the endogenous variable of the model. But still, you can wonder if even the expression of the residential amenities as a linear function is valid. And that's why in the paper we provide, and we are going to provide even more, out of the model evidence with out of the model variables that residential amenities are not correlated with investment subsidies. So to do that, we use variables out of the model variables that might be good proxy of residential amenities, and we are going to we show that that these variables, they are not correlated with investment subsidy shocks. So, for example, we look at the link between number of firms and investment subsidy shock. We also look at the link between public employment, which is not a variable in our model, and investment subsidy shock, but we are going to provide even more evidence in the future. We are going to look at, for example, the number of restaurants or the quality of schools to be sure that residential amenities are not linked to investment subsidy shock. Okay, so assume that you believe in equation 1. Still, in the model we have introduced a lot of structural parameters, and we have only 2 moments. And of course, 2 moments are not enough to identify more parameters than 2. So for the GMM, we provide more moments by adding stronger mean independence condition of the form that mean independence condition means that a variable is the expectation of a variable conditional on another one is equal to 0. And if you show that there is that the stronger mean independence condition holds, you can show that your variable is uncorrelated with any function of the instrument. So that's what we use in the GMM, and so we use indicators that partition the instrument Z distribution. Okay, so I don't think I have maybe the time to detail too much that. I don't know. Okay, so
you still have 8.
Okay, so I'm going to give more detail.
Almost
Okay.
10 minutes.
Merci. Okay, so the idea here again is to show that even that before the shock, all the endogenous variables of the model are not correlated with the investment subsidies before the shock, and even when we condition by the value of the shock. So I don't know if I'm very clear, but here we show what are the result of the So regression before of the double difference of, for example, here it's the public good G, the double difference of the logarithm of the public good G. So we look at how delta logarithm of G that we look minus 6 years before the shock and minus 2 years before the shock. And we regress this variable by the investment subsidy shock at time 0. And we do that, but we partition by the value of the shock. And we see that there is basically no pre-trend. Okay, so that's what we want to show. And so this for us, so we show that there is, before the shock, there is the mean independence conditions hold for all the endogenous variable. And as if you believe to the model and to the residential amenity expression, it means that before the shock, the same condition also holds for the residential amenities, because as we said before, the residential amenities is a linear function of the endogenous variable of the model. So that's how we show in the model that this mean independence condition holds. So we follow a paper by Sturm and Affel to prove that. They basically do the same thing. Okay, and so once we have this more moment, we are able to perform the GMM. And so we are going to estimate some of the parameters of the model, but not all of them, because there is a lot of them. So we calibrate some of them in the literature. So, for example, the housing, the share of housing expenditure in a household budget, we take it from the literature, because it's pretty well estimated, and we perform the GMM for several value of this parameter. We perform the GMM, but we perform the GMM, but as we need to, as the number of okay, again, we partition the distribution of our instrument with indicator. And so there is an ad hoc parameter, which is the number of partitions that we do. And so we assure ourselves that our estimation do not depend too much on the number of cells. So that's why there is several cells. And once we have calibrated some of the parameters, that we have taken the value from the literature for other parameters, then we are able to estimate 4 parameters. So the spillover parameter, the public test parameter, the mobility parameter, and the public good congestion parameter. So what is important here is that for some of the parameters, we are able to compare them to the literature, but not only one of them. Actually, it's a public good test parameter that is estimated in other papers, and the estimate that we find is lies within the range of the literature, so it's reassuring. And as for the spillover parameter, we find a strong estimate and to express it more, to make it more easy to understand, if you take the median municipal federation size, which is 27, that means that in the median municipal federation, there is 27 municipalities. In this municipal federation, in the household, they value in the bundle of local public goods that they value, 4 to 11% comes from the local public good that they pay for, and 3.2 to 3.5% come from each of the municipalities that are part of the same municipal federation. So it's a lot. It means that 4 to 11% come from the local public good of their own jurisdiction, but all the rest come from all the other municipalities that are in the same municipal federation. So this it means that people value a lot the local public goods that come from other municipalities, but this high result can be a bit surprising. But one must think that municipal federation in France are very big. That means that there is a high number of municipalities in them, and on the other hand, municipalities are very small. So the median size of municipalities in terms of population is 1,000. So that means that on average, there is 1,000 inhabitants in municipalities. So of course, these 1,000 inhabitants are not going to use only the local public good of their own municipalities. They are going to go elsewhere because in their little municipalities, there is not all the local public goods that they need. Okay. And so with the estimation of the spillover parameter, we are able to perform a little counterfactual exercise. So here again, to remember that in our paper, we only assess one of the disadvantages of decentralization. That is the fact that there might be spillover effect and that municipalities might under-provide local public good. But we don't model all the advantage of decentralization. So of course, when we are going to perform a welfare exercise, we are going to find that centralization reform is going to have strong welfare effect. But for the politics who wants to decide what is the optimal level of decentralization or centralization, one needs also to assess all the advantage of decentralization. But okay, so that being said, when we perform our little exercise, we find strong welfare gain if the provision of local public good went from zero coordination to full coordination at the municipal federation level. So but again, it's an upper bound and it does not factor in centralization that were lost. Okay, so to conclude, so in this paper, we try to provide a flexible framework to give upper bound of centralization welfare gain with a special equilibrium model with endogenous public good and spillover. We show also that one can exploit differential responses to local public good shocks at different geographic levels to uncover the intensity of local spillover. And we show that for France, inhabitants, they enjoy a lot the local public good provided by municipalities that are in the same municipal federations as their own municipality. And we show that centralization reform would improve welfare when we take into account only the spillover effect. Okay.
Thank you, Aurélie, for the very comprehensive analysis of spillovers. So
should I stop the screen sharing? No.
If you have other slides that may be useful to answer questions. Okay. So let's now open the line for discussion. I can start. If I understand correctly, the border between two blocks is hermetic for spillovers.
Yes.
And so, yeah, if you consider two cities, a city A in a block of jurisdiction 1 and a city B in a block of jurisdiction 2 that are neighbors, there is no spillovers among them. Also another case, if you consider a block that contains 200 municipalities, that can be the case. The intensity of spillovers is the same, even if there is a distance of, let's say, 60 kilometers between two of them. And so have you tried to introduce a degree of spillovers that would decrease with the distance? And have you tried to introduce porous borders between blocks?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yes, of course, it's true that our model is very simple and a bit far in a way from the reality, because we assume that as soon as you leave a block, all the spillover dies out, which is a bit far from the reality, because we of course, in the reality, the distance matter, and maybe what matters most is the distance. So we are trying to answer to address this problem. So we don't want actually to change too much the binary structure of the model, because in a way it's simple, but it makes estimation quite easy, which is not the case if you use distance, and if you put distance in the matrix of valuation in how you construct the bundle of local public goods that inhabitants enjoy. So what we are trying to do instead is rather changing the border of all of the block we are using. So we are trying to use random borders, but of still neighboring cities, and to change the size of the blocks that we are using. So we are departing from the municipal federations that exist in France, and to show how the spillovers that we find within block depend on the size of the block. But it's not that easy to answer your question, which is a very good question, because if we introduce distance in the model, then we lose a part of its simplicity, which is that it's a block diagonal, and which disappear if you introduce distance. So we are trying to address your question, but taking a different path, that is changing the border using other definition of blocks.
Okay, thanks. Timothy Goodspeed has a clarification question. Timothy, do you want to unmute your microphone?
Sure. Yes, I was just wondering if you could describe exactly what the subsidy is that you're talking about. Is it a general subsidy for all goods, or specific subsidy for particular types of goods? And what kinds of public goods in your graph, it just says public goods. So what kinds of public goods are these that are being provided? Is it more like transportation, or more like parks, or exactly what it is?
Okay, so thank you for your question, Timothy. So as for the subsidies that we use, so there's two different kind of subsidies. So first, in the model, we introduce all the subsidies that can exist. And then in the empirical part, we are using only investment subsidies, because in France, French municipality, they can receive both expenditure subsidies and investment subsidies. Expenditure subsidies, most of the time they are formula based, so we believe that they are not exogenous at all. As for the investment subsidies, most of them are not formula based. They can concern pretty much a lot of type of local public goods. So it can be the subsidy can be allocated because the municipalities is going to construct a new swimming pool, because the municipality is going to renovate a road. So basically, it can fund any kind of local public good that are handled by the municipality. Okay, so that's for the investment subsidies. And your second question was, okay, I will investment subsidy, and I don't remember your second question.
I think you answered.
Both?
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just to give you one additional information about investment subsidies, because for us it would be very nice to have like a list of all the applicants and all the municipalities that apply to get a subsidy, and all the municipalities that got a subsidies, and all the municipalities that didn't get a subsidies but are informal exchange with members of the French administration, is that in fact it doesn't work that way. It means that there is a broad range of local public goods that can benefit from subsidies. And so municipalities, they need to know that this kind of subsidy exists, okay? Then they need to apply. They apply for an amount. They apply for a kind of project that will increase their local public good. And then there is some member of the French administration that receives the application. And then, in fact, it doesn't happen that one application is refused, is refused. Most of the time what happens is that either you are accepted, or if you are not accepted, the French administration is going to tell you what is wrong with your application and you are going to apply later on. So mostly the exogeneity of the investment subsidy comes from the fact that some of the mayor don't know the existence of the subsidies, and those who know, some of them will not apply well, but they will be able to apply later on. So it's more a question of timing and the uncertainty of the timing and the amount. But still, you could argue that the fact that a mayor is very efficient to getting subsidies is correlated with other stuff in the empirics. That's why we want to provide more evidence that getting a subsidy is uncorrelated with, for example, the number of restaurants or stuff like that. But just to give everyone some idea of how this application and the subsidies are allocated.
Thanks. Are there other questions?
Yeah, so I have a question. First of all, thanks for the presentation. It's very interesting, very nice work, very detailed. And apologies for my voice. I hope you can understand me. So my question is a bit more, it's not about this paper specifically, but I mean the analysis, but it's about the so what, so the implications in a way, because it's, I mean, the analysis seems to come up with the story, evidence that increasing coordination is indeed wouldn't be helpful from a welfare gain perspective. The point is then, but we know from the literature and that it's there are issues when then we try to implement some measures to aggregate municipalities and to do mergers or cooperation, etc. So both because there are political economy issues and because there are some sort of coordination failures. So in theory it will work, but then in practice it doesn't. And so I wonder, I mean, in face of this criticism, how would you respond, and especially how would you target your paper, your findings to policymakers that will tell you, yeah, but we know that it doesn't work in practice?
Okay, so that's a very good question, and actually I thought a lot about it, because I have a colleague, Clémence Tricot, who has worked also on a French municipality and on the fact to belong to a municipal federation, and I think she find very interesting result, because she worked on the municipalities that didn't belong to a municipal federation up to the point when it became compulsory. So it's the municipalities that really didn't want at all to belong to a municipal federation. At some point, it was compulsory, so they had to come in a municipal federation. And I think she finds very interesting result, because she finds that at the municipal federation level, there is a welfare increase, because basically local public good increase. But she finds that for the municipality that didn't want to be part of a municipal federation, they lose in terms of public good, because most of the time it's small municipalities that are at the periphery of the municipal federation. So they lose, for example, libraries, they lose local public service that are very local, but they win because there is an improvement in the public transportation at the municipal federation level. So that's one evidence. The other is that French administration has tried to assess whether municipal federation were efficient or not, and they found very depressing result, which was basically, so municipal federation were supposed to decrease the cost of local public good, but actually they doubled it because none of the employees at the municipality level were destroyed when the municipal federation were created. But the thing is, and plus, there is some anecdotal evidence of people that are very against municipal federation, even though in their action they like municipal federation because they are using local public good of municipal federations that are in the same municipal federations and their own municipality. But why? Because in fact, in terms of politics, they are not electing the mayor of the municipal federation. So for them, the creation of municipal federation is a lose of, they lose in terms of democracy. So I think in terms of political implication, I think our paper kind of shows that there is some. It would be welfare improving to merge municipalities, but you have to be very careful to small municipalities that will lose powers and then when they will be incorporated in a big municipal federation. And second, you have to be careful about the democracy. You have to also reform how people vote for their representatives at the municipal federation level. You can, I wouldn't say to a politics that we should merge municipality. We should there should be no more municipality, and we should only there should only be municipal federation without changing other crucial part of the political and political system.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Yes, we had the opportunity to listen, Clémence, 2 weeks ago concerning the election. Since 2014, the conseillers communautaires are now elected. So it may change the way people perceive the decisions at the intermunicipal level.
And I guess sometimes maybe the municipal federation makes sense for the people in terms of and sometimes the municipal federation makes sense in terms of economically. I mean, sometimes the municipal federation can be quite close from the urban area or the for example, the labor market. And I guess sometimes it's less true. For example, in the case of the Paris region, I guess people don't maybe inhabitants of the suburb of Paris don't of course they are linked to Paris in terms of local public good, but maybe they don't really perceive that they have a say in how public transport are modeled at the urban area level. So I think your point, Marie, is very interesting. But I guess still there is some perception, at least by inhabitants, that they lose some kind of choice to vote when they are incorporated in a municipal federation. But I guess it needs still more work.